Welcome to New York Got Game.
We are back with another episode of New York Got Game. It's about to be a very interesting next few weeks of New York basketball as Liberty, look, they just continue to win games and are looking like a team that could very well win it all. The Knicks, their offseason is about to heat up where there are so many possibilities when it comes to shaping this team's roster. And it's the same deal for the Brooklyn Nets as well. Now, this week, we're going to talk about the Red Hot Liberty and the Knicks. We're going to do it with a writer who covers both teams. So, let's get right to it. All right, the Liberty, they got themselves another statement win this past Saturday. They knocked off the Las Vegas Aces in a finals rematch 90-82. And the Knicks, they have a very interesting offseason coming up where there'll be a lot of talk about running it back or making changes. Let's talk about both teams. And we're going to do it with a writer who covers the Liberty for Winsidr and the Knickerbockers for the Knicks Wall. Returning here for her second appearance on New York Got Game, the amazing Candace Pedraza. How you doing, Candace?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, thank you so much, and happy Father's Day.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's been
absolutely.
a good Father's Day. Glad to have you here to talk some hoops, though. Have you been enjoying the Liberty season thus far? Because I have.
There's no way to not enjoy this start. 12-2, I think currently second place in standings. You can't complain about that.
Can't complain. The Liberty have been balling thus far. I've been enjoying it. Candace has been enjoying it. And Candace, what we've got to talk about off the top is we saw the finals rematch on Saturday between New York and the Las Vegas Aces. And Liberty, they used a strong second half in that one to power past the Aces for, and we didn't even mention this, their 8th consecutive win. What impressed you about the Liberty in this latest victory?
I think just the wire-to-wire feel of the victory. It never felt like they fell into the type of third quarter of doom lull that they tend to fall into during games this season. Their three ball, first of all, was just falling the entire game. I think they were something like 7 and 8 in the first quarter from three-point range, which is ridiculous, and a stat that you'd probably associate more often with the Aces, who have a lot of sharpshooters and Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young on their team, who have been struggling, but they were actually doing pretty well yesterday. It wasn't enough to get the victory over the Liberty. So the three ball was really impressive. On top of that, I think the defense that we saw from Jonquel Jones, especially on A'ja Wilson, was really impressive. A'ja was still obviously able to get something going, but her teammates weren't able to as easily feed her in the post because of JJ's defense, and that was huge to the victory as well. And I think just defensively all around between the starters as well as the bench lineups, when you have Leo Fibic involved, Ivana Jokic involved in the on the floor defensively, they've just been able to shut down other benches as well. So it's just been an all-around team effort. You feel the synergy with this team that you maybe didn't feel last season, and that obviously ruffled Vegas's feathers yesterday.
Yeah, I keep bringing that up with this team because a good friend, Christina Williams, I said this last week on the show, she's been bringing that up, the chemistry, the continuity. She even texted me during the game because Ryan Rucco said this on the broadcast, he used those C words, and you feel like you're starting to see it build with this team, and it feels really good with the Liberty. Now, you mentioned JJ. We talked about her last week on the show. 34 points, 8 boards for Jonquel Jones on Saturday. And last week I had Gigi Spear here in studio, and she called JJ the MVP of the team. I got to look at her game, and I'm like, man, this is the best she's probably looked since 2021 when she won league MVP. Is she playing at an all WNBA level right now in your eyes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with Gigi on JJ being the MVP of this team so far. JJ has been, like I said, on both ends of the floor. Defensively, she has managed to take on the other team's best post player for almost all 40 minutes of every game that she's played in this season. Offensively, her three ball is just looking silky smooth. She looks extremely confident from deep. But then also you have to worry about the fact that she's an excellent finisher. She's very difficult to stop in the post because she is just so strong when she gets there. What also helps her in this, I would say, resurgence this season compared to last, where she was sort of working through injury and trying to get back to 100% while also trying to lead this team to the finals, which she was probably their best player in the finals as well, is the fact that she has Sabrina Ionescu feeding her throughout the entire game. And that has been such a game changer for this Liberty team and for Jonquel, who's able to just communicate almost I don't even know how else to describe it. I mean, they're just connected.
Right?
Yeah, non-verbally.
You and I were talking, I don't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah.
we were talking about this before we started recording, just how good they look in terms of their pick and roll synergy. What have you been seeing there that you like about how John Quell's been feeding off his abs?
Oh, man. I mean, first of all, I have to give credit also to Breanna Stewart because I feel like she's sort of sensed that chemistry as well. She gets out of the way almost when you have Sabrina coming up the floor with the ball and John Quell is able to get in really good positioning in the post. Stewie is also a really good post scorer, but I think she recognizes that JJ is probably their best threat in that space on the floor. And so when Sabrina's bringing the ball up and you have JJ working alongside her, it feels automatic.
Yeah.
You know that they're going to get something out of it when when Sabrina calls for that screen from John Quell and then she starts to roll towards the basket. You just know that she's either going to score, draw a foul, or at least get a really good look at the rim. And that I can't say was as consistent last season with Courtney Vandersloot being primarily the point guard and the one on the floor with John Quell as they tried to build chemistry. It feels like Sabrina and JJ work a little bit better than those two do.
It feels like that. You can see it. And I think you made such a great point about John Quell and I think the word you used was resurgence, if you want to call it that, for this year. When you see her playing better, I think you have to know what Candace is talking about here and the fact that she was working through getting healthy while trying to get adjusted to new teammates. And we saw it in the second half of last year and into the playoffs where she looked a lot better. And it just seems like she's built upon that this year. You know what helps? She's healthy. That helps too. Now, while Jones has been great, Ace, for the Liberty, the reigning league MVP, she hasn't been exactly playing her best basketball. And I mean this in terms of shooting the ball from three, shooting a career worst 18.2% from the three-point arc. Are you concerned about Stewie's play in shooting the ball? And I want to know, she's been doing other things. She's been rebounding really well. She's been defending. So it's not like there's not just one part of her game that means she's bad offensively. But the 18.2%, below her standards, right? We can acknowledge that. Are you encouraged by the fact that this team is 12-2 with her not playing the best in terms of shooting the ball deep? Because we would think that's going to come at some point. So does it matter to you that you're encouraged about how the team is playing despite her shooting struggles from downtown?
If I'm the Liberty, I feel thrilled that she's,
right.
If she's only shooting 18% from the floor and you're still 12-2, that probably, if you would have told the team that to start the season, they'd probably look at you a little funny. Stewie's one of the major leaders of this team, maybe not the only one, but one of the major faces of this team, one of the major leaders of this team. Obviously, just such a decorated veteran of the league in general. And so the fact that she's struggling this much from three-point range and this team is still performing as well as they are speaks volumes to not only the rest of the team's ability to sort of say, hey, we'll pick up the slack, don't worry about it, focus on other areas of the floor, but also her ability to fall back and say, all right, cool, I'm going to focus on rebounding. I will focus on my mid-range game or my finishing. On passing, on acting as a screener. Stewie is still, I believe, almost averaging a double-double, despite the fact that she's shooting so poorly from three-point range. And so if I'm the Liberty, that is probably towards the bottom of my list of concerns for this team right now, is the fact that she's shooting so poorly from deep, because you trust that shot will start to fall, and when it does, it will be very scary.
Yeah, it will be. And another thing I should note on that point, I remember Stewie talking about this a lot in the offseason and preseason, is that she is thinking about pacing herself well this year, because last year she talked about, she had some really big scoring games early in the season, and there was probably some burnout. Sandy Brondello's talked about it as well, too. So we'll see how that goes. I wouldn't worry too much about the shooting struggles for Breanna Stewart just now. But we've seen the Liberty knock off the previously undefeated Connecticut Sun. We saw that the previous Saturday, and then the defending back-to-back champion Aces this Saturday. Do you view New York as a team that's posed to come away with this 2024 title? I know we're only 14 games in. The vibes are good, Ace.
Yeah.
But are you looking at them as, hey, this is this team that can win it all this year?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that coming into this season, they're one of the, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 contenders in the league currently. I would say with them, Connecticut, Las Vegas, and now I'd probably say Minnesota is thrown into that mix as well. These are the teams that you probably expect to see in the finals come this fall. And so we might get a preview of it with the Commissioner's Cup matchup between the Liberty and the Lynx. But New York is the same team with a couple of tweaks to their bench. Currently, one tweak to their starting lineup with Kayla Thornton filling in for Courtney Vandersloot while she's away. But this feels very different, and I think Liberty fans know what we're talking about when we say it feels very different. It's the chemistry, the C word.
There we go, the C word is back.
The chemistry is completely different. They finally feel like a unit, cohesive unit, compared to last season where you knew that they had talent on paper. You knew that they had the firepower when necessary, but you did not feel as confident in them as you felt in maybe Las Vegas, where you know they've been playing together for a few years. They've already won a championship together. They know what it takes to win another, and they know how to play with each other on the floor, and they know how to deal with adversity on the floor and off. The Liberty finally feel like a team that can contend with that level of togetherness, and that's definitely worth betting on their ability to get all the way to the finals this year again. Yeah,
and I think it matters too, right? The experience that they had last year, just even losing in the finals in 4 games, it does matter, them getting an experience. I think that built that hunger, Ace, in terms of them wanting to come back. And I don't know, we've seen a really good focus, and they haven't shied away from calling the Connecticut game when they were undefeated and they knocked them off. They called that one a big game. Sabrina said it was a statement win. They said yesterday's game, Saturday's game against the Aces, also called that a big win. So the Liberty haven't been running from the smoke. They're like, look, well, this is the focus we're trying to do. We know these other teams that are good. We're trying to beat them, and we'll see what they do. Now, you mentioned this a bunch of times, the defense, because that was a concern around this team coming off of last year. Looked good, had the players, but especially I'm talking, and people who watch the show know we've talked about the perimeter defense with the Liberty. There have been some interesting lineups, and you and I were talking about this before, because they've had Benijah Laney Hamilton, Kennedy Burke, Leona Fibich on the court playing and a little bit more size, spacing with the shooting. Do you like the ability of this team to put more size on the floor this season with players who can keep the ball in front of them and players in front of them? Do you like the fact that they can use a little bit more size now? And do you think they'll use this in closing lineups?
Yeah, I think that comparing this team's defense to last year's, you can see the difference in terms of the trust that Sandy Brondello has in her bench to be able to defend and fill in for the minutes where she needs to rest her starters, right? So last year, it felt like she couldn't really get as deep into her bench as she needed to rest her starters and give them some fresh legs and to be able to defend for all 40 minutes. This season, you have Leo Fibich, you have Kennedy Burke, you have a much bigger, as you mentioned, set of players that you're able to throw on the perimeter when you need to rest your starters. But in addition to that, the starters are actually defending pretty darn well compared to last year. You even have Sabrina Ionescu, who I think maybe the one knock on her throughout her career so far has been the fact that she hasn't been the best defender. She's been doing a pretty decent job of defending this season so far. As you mentioned as well, last season they had like spurts where they were able to defend for long periods of time. I think towards the second half of the season last year, they were one of the better defensive teams, but that didn't end up mattering against such a such a potent Las Vegas Aces team in the finals. This season, you can see that they have, their schemes down. They understand who's switching and when. The communication on the floor is a lot better than it was last season. And I think yesterday's game is a really big testament to that fact. I mean, the switching, especially when it came to doubling Asia and then falling back and still being able to defend on the perimeter, it was amazing. And so you hope that they're able to continue that sort of defensive intensity, I would say, throughout the season. And it helps. You're not going to play the Aces every game.
No, right. You have to try to get up for other opponents, right? So you have to do that, and they clearly were up for that and challenging Asia Wilson. I was very intrigued going into that game how they try to slow her down, and they did a lot of what I thought. They sent some doubles. They showed her different looks. They made her life tough. You're not going to stop Asia Wilson because she's the best player in the league, but you're going to try to slow her down. And I thought the Liberty did a good job of that, and it's a testament to their defense. They have a lot more options this year. Now, I don't know about you, Ace. Well, actually, I do know because we actually talked a little bit about this before, too. But I'm actually really impressed, and I continue to be impressed by the development of Sabrina Ionescu this season because she's become much more efficient scoring the ball this season. Do you view her as a 3-level scorer now in the W?
Yeah.
Because I felt like a lot of times before it was like, all right, We know she can shoot the three.
Of course.
We know she's dangerous from there. What else is she going to do? Right. The game's opened up. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. So I think her floater especially has been killer this season so far. It could still get a little bit more consistent, but you could tell she's been working on it, and she tries pulling it out throughout games so far this season, which I appreciate because it's good for defenses to know we can't just defend her around the perimeter. We're going to have to defend her across the entire floor. In addition to that, though, in addition to the floater and also her finishing getting a lot better, she's also been such a threat as a passer this season, and that has been huge, especially with Courtney Vandersloot out for the last couple of games and out for a majority to the start of this season. Sabrina has filled in that one role seamlessly, and I think that has allowed her to become more of a leader with this team that, you know, obviously has added MVPs in Brianna Stewart and Jonquel Jones. She is able to insert herself into that conversation. I'm not saying Sabrina Ionescu is going to win an MVP this season. There's a lot of stiff competition there, including from probably her teammate Jonquel Jones. But her passing has really inserted her into this offense in a way that I think defenses aren't necessarily prepared to handle her as easily as they might have been last year, where, again, they'd be focused on stopping the three ball from her. Or, you know, trying to get the ball out of her hands and into Courtney Vandersloot, who's less of an offensive threat. But yeah, her finishing, her floater, and her three-point shot, absolutely. She has been developing into a very serious three-level scoring threat.
Yeah, she's definitely there. And listen, this is why you have to have a little bit of patience. I know there was a lot of people worrying about where she was going to be, #1 overall pick. She gets injured in the first season. And you see the development in year 5 where she's expanded her game, and you think it's only going to get better, which bodes well for the Liberty. You think that's the case. All right, you brought up the Commissioner's Cup earlier. We know that the Liberty will host the Commissioner's Cup game against the Minnesota Lynx on the 25th of this month at the Barclays Center. The Lynx did hand New York one of their 2 losses this season. Do you think the Liberty will be motivated for revenge here, and can they make it back-to-back Commissioner's Cup titles?
Yeah, absolutely will be motivated by revenge. I feel like they've been motivated by revenge this entire season. It has felt. So I wouldn't doubt that they would use that as a motivation here as well. They're going to also obviously want to defend home court. They will also want to defend their title as Commissioner's Cup champions. And I think now they have a better understanding of how to stop Minnesota in terms of their three-ball volume and their three-ball threats. In Kayla McBride, first of all, who I believe, if she's not the top three-point shooting player in the WNBA right now, she's up there. In addition to Nafisa Collier, who maybe isn't as much of a three-point threat, but she will be a threat in the post. You know, they have so many different ways that they can kill you on the floor. And I think the Liberty are more prepped against that type of potent offense now compared to when they faced them earlier in the season. And I apologize, I can't remember off the top of my head if Courtney Vandersloot was playing in that game.
I believe she did.
I believe she did. So they're going to be facing a different starting lineup as well, the Minnesota Lynx versus New York's. New York will have Kayla Thornton in the starting lineup. They also have a lot more trust in their bench. Leo Fibich, I think, will play a bigger role in being able to match the three-point volume that Minnesota will be putting up against them. It's going to be fun. That will be a very fun game.
Yeah.
I think both of these teams are peaking at the same time as each other, very similarly to last season's Cup, where it was New York and Vegas peaking at the same time and meeting at the summit. Very similar vibes. So I'm really looking forward to that game. But I think New York is absolutely, maybe not night and day, but they're looking a little bit different, a little bit more confident than they did in that first game against Minnesota to start the year.
Yeah, I think they will. I think they were still working some things out, to your point, right? At that time, they were still trying to work these things out. And that should be a good, I know the time hasn't been announced for that game at the Barclays Center. I'm hoping to be there in the building. That should be a good one for the Commissioner's Cup. And see, I enjoy the Commissioner's Cup. I know there were some people with the NBA in-season tournament last year. Oh, we don't understand it. You know what's nice, Ace? When you could win more trophies.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Won't complain.
Nobody can
Nice
complain.
banner, too.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Yeah.
All right, so this week, the Liberty have got another road game in Phoenix. This following their game in Vegas against the Mercury. They'll play on Tuesday. Then they've got back-to-back home games against the Sparks on Thursday and Saturday. What will you be keeping your eye on with the Liberty this week in the next 3 games?
So I think one with Phoenix, they have Brittany Griner back, and so they haven't faced a Phoenix team this year so far. With Brittany Griner, many teams haven't, and so with BG on the floor, I'm very curious to see the battle between her and Jonquel Jones in the post. I think that's going to be a ton of fun. I think both of them play very similarly in terms of on defense and as well as with how they score. And so that should be interesting just to see what looks they throw at BG, especially as teammates, I'm sure, are trying to get her going and trying to get themselves some more chemistry with her on the floor since they have a couple of new faces in Phoenix as well. And then with the Sparks are a rebuilding team, but they feel weird because on any given night, they can absolutely battle it out. And then you have Rickea Jackson, who is finally looking like the, Tennessee player that we all loved to watch in terms of just her ability to score at will. Just such a silky finisher as well. And so I'm very curious to see how Breanna Stewart maybe handles her, or who they throw on her in the first place. And I'm also very curious to see Cam Brink and her ability to protect the rim against Jonquel Jones, specifically in the post. So it should be fun. I think it's going to be a lot of front court battles for the next couple of games.
Some good front court play this week. We should see that. And some young front court players who are going to get tested on the other side. It'll be good. Obviously, BG being a veteran, she will test Jonquel too, and now she's back in the fold for the Mercury. So we'll see how it goes. Interesting week for the Liberty. They will look to build on their 12-2 record. Talk Liberty, but we also got to talk Knicks, guys, because I got Ace here, does her work for the Knicks Wall. Before we wrap, I got to ask you this about the Knicks, because the draft is next week. What young players would you like to see the Knicks add to this roster that you believe can help the team win next season?
So the two names that I think that Knicks fans have probably seen come up a lot, and two players that I've definitely been curious about maybe seeing in a Knicks uniform would be Ryan Dunn and Bub Carrington. Ryan Dunn, he is apparently, I'm not very draft savvy, so I'm going based off of, clips and things like that I've done for just my own research for the Knicks Wall, but Ryan Dunn seems like the perfect Tibbs player. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Defense first, for sure.
He seems like the perfect Tibbs player, the perfect Tibbs wing, especially. And I think what the Knicks desperately needed in this postseason were young defenders who had size. You had Deuce McBride, who, while he is a dogged defender, he is a guard, and he is a smaller guard. And so his ability to guard somebody like Tyrese Halliburton, who's a little bit taller than him, a little bit quicker, it just didn't mesh. If you would have had maybe a more developed defensive wing to throw on Tyrese Halliburton in those moments where he was getting hot, might have made a difference. Maybe we see a different Eastern Conference Finals matchup. Who's to say? And then the other young player that I think would be really cool to see on the Knicks would be Bub Carrington. I actually recently did a draft profile on him for the Knicks Wall. And
I like him a lot. He went to my alma mater, University of Pittsburgh.
There you go. All right, so I picked the right person.
You did.
So with him, I really like his ability to pass. He would, I think, fit super well in a backcourt with Deuce McBride off the bench. Deuce, I see more as a 2. He is a good passer, but I would love to see him working alongside another another larger guard, so that he doesn't have to worry too much about defending taller guards, which there are a ton of in the NBA currently. So his passing really intrigues me. I think his shooting numbers, while not great at Pitt this past season, he has shown flashes of being able to get to that level, and shooting is something you can always fix. And again, not to keep harping on Deuce McBride as an example, but he developed in Westchester for a few years. He came into the league, didn't really have a shot, and now he's one of the Knicks' best three-point shooters.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
You know,
I like both of these players. Dunn, a little bit concerned with his shooting. Gives me Andre Roberson vibes, right? Really good defender. A little bit concerned with the shooting. Obviously, I'm going to be biased. I'm a Pitt guy. I watched a lot of Bub Carrington this year. I watched a ton of Pitt basketball. Struggled with the outside shot early on. Got better as they got into conference play. I think he's really skilled. My question, Ace, is he going to be there when the Knicks picks are there? I'm not sure about that. I think they might have to move up to go get him. I think a lot of teams are hot on him. I think he's good. I like him for the same reasons you like. I think the Knicks could use a bigger guard, 6'5". I think Carrington is a good motor. We'll see. Listen, I love to see a pick guy on the Knicks. No, I got no problem with
crossed,
that.
yeah.
Fingers crossed. No problem with that. All right, so we talked about the draft, but the other thing that I know you've heard, seen this, Knicks fans on social media. What do you think the team should do this offseason? Should they add an all-star like some fans want, or should they run it back? That's the big question. I'm in the run it back camp. Where are you?
All right, so not to be like playing both sides or anything like that, but I could see an argument for both. I could see an argument for maybe trying to slide someone in that A, fits Jalen Brunson's timeline and plays alongside him or could play alongside him very well on the floor, and someone that could potentially replace Isaiah Hartenstein if he were to leave in free agency. It's not a guarantee that he will still be a Knick going into next season. So the one name that I think 50% of Knicks fans, at least on social media, are like clamoring for, and 50% are ready to stand outside of MSG protesting over is Karl Anthony Towns being a name that I think that the Knicks are constantly connected to. They are always connected to Cat. He is obviously from Jersey, so it would be a homecoming for him. He is such a skilled stretch big. I think the one issue with him that I think Knicks fans really are concerned about when it comes to him is his motivation, and if he's able to play again with Tibbs, who was his coach a couple of years ago. And so that's the iffy part. Me personally, I'm okay either way, as long as they don't, trade away a huge portion of their core. I'm happy. But for them, I think I'm leaning more towards running it back, maybe just letting the front office cook a little bit, be able to make the marginal moves that they tend to make that end up being a big win for them, to the tune of, a small contract that lands Dante DiVincenzo, or, a small trade that lands Josh Hart, things of that nature. I think I'd rather see them pursue than maybe take a big swing right now.
Yeah, some people, it's offseason, some people aren't going to be happy unless they make a big swing. They're going to be like, look, you were a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals. You got to get it. I don't think it's necessary. We just talked about this with Liberty. They've got good chemistry. They've got good continuity. Yes, we're bringing up those C words again. I think that can matter.
Yeah.
Me personally, Karl Anthony Towns is a no for me.
The other thing with that, too, is that I just feel like the one argument that I've seen Knicks fans make for taking a big swing is that other teams will get better. Other teams are going to make the big swing. Pacers are going to make a big swing. Miami will take a big swing to try to finally get another chip and maybe see Jimmy Butler thrive for like maybe 1 or 2 more years while in South Beach.
Yeah, you just made my director Zach happy. He's a Heat fan, so he wants to see that happen.
I mean, but at the same time, New York is not like those teams. They're set. The only reason they struggled so much in this postseason was because of health issues.
And see, that's the thing for me. So I think that's the point. So I think sometimes people worry so much about other teams getting better or adding a player. Let me just put this. Adding a player does not guarantee that you're going to be better next year, an all-star. Sometimes it's health, sometimes it's chemistry. Look at the Bucks this season with Damian Lillard. That did not necessarily make them better. Sometimes it's the smaller, less sexier moves that can do that. And if you believe in chemistry, you believe in continuity, which I'm a big believer in, I think that matters. I think there's also incremental development that sometimes we don't think about. You mentioned this just now. You talked about Miles McBride. What Knicks fan or anybody covering the Knicks, any of us who cover the Knicks, would have said, hey, we saw Miles McBride playing a major role with this team and playing major playoff minutes. And here he was in the playoffs. This is not even about injuries, because he was a major part of the rotation once they made the trade for OG Anunoby. He's good.
Yeah.
You can develop players. You can bring people in your system. You know who does a good job about that? No Knicks fans don't want to hear it. Miami does. They do a good job about that and believe in their continuity. So I lean more to that. I think you got to worry about the name. You had your concerns about Cat being a fit. I have major concerns about Cat being a fit here in New York, and particularly because of what you said about his motivation. Sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make, right? There's just the little moves you got to make. So we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting Knicks offseason. I'm excited. I can't believe we're here already. It's going to be a fun summer. We got the Knicks offseason. We've got the Liberty to talk about, who are looking really good. And I know you'll be excited covering it all for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited.
All right, we're going to have you back again here on New York Got Game. I appreciate you, Ace. That is Candace Pedraza. Check out her work with Winsidr covering the Liberty and the Knicks Wall covering the Knicks. And we'll see what the Liberty do. They got to keep rolling because they're looking really good right now. Both of us, we are excited. So next week, as we move forward into the summer, we're going to break down the options for the New York Knicks in the 2024 draft, as I've got a special guest lined up to help me break down potential options in terms of young talent that the Bockers can add to their roster. It's time to bounce. As that does it for this episode, I appreciate my guest, Candace Pedraza, for coming through. Always appreciation for my wonderful team, for my producer, Lee Insler, editor, Catherine Cooper, and director, Zach Taub. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll see you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.